Hey, what is going on everyone, and welcome back to Too Much Tech. And in today's video we are going to be reviewing the BenQ MOBIUZ EX2710. This is a 27-inch IPS 1080p 144 hertz display with HDR 400, and I do want to give a huge shout out to BenQ for sending out this monitor for review. So I'll say this in the beginning because there are a couple variants of this monitor. So there's this one that I have today, the 27-inch version, then there is also a 25-inch version with pretty similar specs. Obviously it's a bit smaller, being at 1080p resolution. I think the 25-inch is the sweet spot, and it's a little bit cheaper as well. That one's $250, the 27-inch is $300. The color that I have is this dark gray color with the silver base with an orange highlight, I'll say. I think it looks pretty cool. I do wish that it was all dark gray with the orange highlight. I think that would look even better, but otherwise it's fine. With this monitor only being 1080p resolution, you have two HDMI 2.0 ports and one DisplayPort 1.2. The buttons on the monitor are pretty simple to use. So the one at the top on the back right side of the monitor is going to be your input button. Then you have a little joystick down below that, and below that you have the power button. In the front of the monitor you also have a button to quickly switch between a few different HDR modes available on the monitor. One thing build quality that I do want to mention, maybe not build quality but more so of a feature, this monitor does actually feature two 2.5 watt speakers. I'll let you guys hear them in just a second, but I actually think that they sound pretty decent. And let's be real, they're not going to be fantastic, but what I noticed about them is that it does give you some pretty clear and decent room filling sound without any distortion, which I think is really important. And that's actually something really nice, especially if you're just getting into PC gaming and you don't have a ton of money to spend on a bunch of different peripherals, because believe me, speakers can be kind of expensive too, and you don't really have to cheap out on speakers as well. These are pretty decent, and these will get you by until you're able to afford the speakers that you want. Now let's go ahead and talk about the display. So this is again a 27-inch 1080p panel that has 99% sRGB coverage, and I think that the color accuracy is actually pretty good. You could definitely use this to create content on as well as game. So let's talk about some gaming performance as well, because you do have a few different standout features of this. So you have FreeSync Premium that also works with G-Sync compatibility. I didn't really have many issues with that at all. You have a black equalizer, a light tuner, motion blur reduction, as well as color vibrance, and then you have a couple different HDR modes. Now unfortunately you're only able to use the blur reduction mode as well as the black equalizer in the FPS preset of the monitor, which is not my favorite. Color wise, it does not look the greatest, and even after a little bit of tuning and spending some time with it, I just can't get it to look as close to my preference as I can. So most of the time I forego using the blur reduction mode as well as the black equalizer, but I'll show you guys on screen the black equalizer performance right now. It's actually pretty decent and it is very usable, but I just didn't prefer the ways the colors look, so I prefer to just use the standard mode most of the time. And I will leave my recommended settings for that standard mode in my Discord channel below if you guys want to see how I set up this monitor to get it to look as good as I prefer. Now of course feel free to tune that and adjust it to your preferences so that the monitor looks good to you. Now I went a whole week using this monitor without adjusting like the different response times and stuff like that, only really switching between having the motion blur reduction on and off. This monitor is not like some others that I've tried before where you can select a bunch of different response time settings. It was pretty much all done for you out of the box, and I don't really know exactly how I feel about that, but it performs actually pretty good. So when I first pulled this monitor out of the box, I did not notice any additional or more noticeable motion blur or anything like that compared to anything else that I've tried. You know, sometimes you pull it out of the box and you start playing with it and you're like, wow, like this looks kind of bad. Like the color might look good after you mess with the color, but in terms of the response time, sometimes you just crank it up naturally to the max overdrive just to see how it handles it. But unfortunately this doesn't really give you that option, so it's pretty much set to the default response time as soon as you pull it out of the box. There's no like other settings that I could find in the on-screen display to configure different levels of response time. Now, that's not a bad thing because it's actually pretty good, but I would have preferred to have just a little bit more control if it was up to me. Now, for 300 bucks, I actually do think that this is a pretty good value, especially if you play a lot of console games as well, because with the upcoming consoles being able to do 120 frames a second, I know that, you know, the Xbox Series S is 300 bucks, the Xbox Series X is $500, and the new PS5 are $400 and $500 respectively for the digital and the disc versions alike. And they are able to push some games up to 120 FPS. I hope that it's actually most games up to 120 FPS. And running at this 1080p resolution for a decent price is a pretty fair deal. Reason why I would say this is good for next gen is because the color on this monitor is actually really good. Now, BenQ, they call the HDR on this monitor HDRI, which means HDR intelligent. And for only having 400 of HDR rating, I'll say it actually performs really, really good. This is not like a monitor with like a ton of local dimming zones and all that stuff. And honestly speaking, the local dimming is kind of it's not bad, but what I definitely notice is the contrast ratios. Now, I will say this, anytime that I use any of the HDR modes, the peak brightness is noticeably lower. So that's why I prefer to use the standard mode, because for the most part, it was a lot brighter. But between the game, the cinema, and the regular HDR mode, I prefer to use the regular HDR mode if I did use the HDR. Most of the time I didn't. Even if it's not, you know, a 4K display and stuff like that. But let's be real, to get a 4K monitor that runs at 120 Hertz is gonna cost a lot more than this one. So again, for the 25 inch, it's only $250. For the 27 inch, it's $300, which is actually a really fair price. And to be honest with you, I would rather pick this over a TN panel all day. Great performance in terms of the motion blur as well as the color. You do have that added value with the built-in speakers as well. And then the design, I also think, is pretty decent. But alright guys, that is going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed, be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you are new to the channel. Again, huge shout out to BenQ for sending out this monitor for review. Thank you guys, and yeah, look forward to reviewing more monitors in the future. What would make this one perfect is if it had 1440p resolution at a pretty reasonable price. I think that would be sweet. Maybe come out with another version of this monitor that gets up to like 160 or 170 Hertz with 1440p resolution. Very similar specs. Maybe bump it up to, you know, HDR 600 with a price tag of around 380 bucks. I think that would actually be a very competitive monitor. But if you guys are interested in this one or the 25 inch, I will leave them linked in the description below. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to join my Discord channel as well, and I will catch you in the next video.